I knew something was wrong the night my son-in-law asked about the safe. We were halfway through roast chicken, the good kind with lemon and thyme that had made my daughter smile since she was a teenager, when Ethan set his fork down and said, too lightly, so, David, what kind of lock is on that safe upstairs? Claire nearly choked on her water. Ethan, why would you ask that? He smiled at her, then at me, spreading his hands as if to show he had no ill intent. Just making conversation. All the talk about break-ins on the neighborhood app lately figured we should be sure your bases are covered. A house like this, man your age. You keep anything important in there. A man my age. That was how he said it. Not cruelly, Ethan rarely did anything cruelly, but with an undercurrent. A label. He had a gift for saying things that sounded like care and felt like condescension. I keep a few papers in there, I said. Family documents. Nothing that would interest a burglar. Huh. He speared a potato, chewed, nodded at the ceiling like the safe was hovering there just above the light fixture. You use a combination or one of those old-school keys? Ethan, Claire said again, a warning in her voice this time. I did not say that the safe had both a keypad and a keyed override. I did not say there was a brass key taped beneath a drawer in my dresser where it had lived since before Ethan met my daughter. I did not say, either, that 3 nights earlier I'd noticed the tape had been peeled back and repressed, off by a sliver. The way a bandage looks after someone curious has lifted the edge to peek. Instead, I folded my napkin, set it beside my plate, and looked him in the eye. I'm covered. He held my gaze a second longer than polite. Then he grinned and raised his glass. That's good. You can't be too careful. Claire changed the subject to the library's summer reading program. Ethan let her. He's good at letting conversations slide when it benefits him, the way a fisherman lets a hooked trout run line until it tires itself out. After dinner, he carried plates to the sink and insisted on washing. He's diligent that way when an audience is present, soap up to his wrists, a hum under his breath, a show of, let me take care of you. It's something people like about him until they notice the places his eyes wander while his hands are busy. The mantel clock. The narrow hallway that leads to the stairs. The picture frames on the bookcase that stand only because I sunk long screws into studs. The little places where value hides. He and Claire had been living with me for 23 days. It was Claire's idea. The call had come early on a Thursday, her voice shaky, the words tumbling out. Job loss. A bigger layoff than they expected. They just needed a few weeks to breathe, to get on top of the mortgage, to figure out next steps. Would I mind? Would it be awful? I said yes before she finished the sentence. I would have said yes if she'd asked to move home with a herd of goats. It was not heroic. She is my daughter. That's the whole argument. You make room. And I'd meant it when I said they could stay as long as they needed. I meant it still, the night Ethan asked about my safe. But by then, I'd also started a different kind of count, one in days rather than rooms. Day 7. When 2 envelopes arrived from credit card companies addressed to Ethan at my address. Day 10, when he spent 30 minutes in the upstairs hall, looking for aspirin while the medicine cabinet full of aspirin sat 6 steps from the guest room. Day 14, when he followed me to the bank and waited by the door just inside the vestibule while I deposited a check, his eyes tracking my hands. Day 18, when he said, "Old houses creak at night, don't they?" And it sounded like a test rather than an observation. On day 23, he asked me about the safe out loud. By the time I finished drying the last plate, Claire had taken Ethan up to the guest room. I could hear the low murmur of their voices through the old oak. The house settles in the evening like a sigh, the little ticks in the pipes, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint, pleasant chime of the mantel clock when it reaches the top of the hour. I wiped the counter, turned off the lights, and stood a moment in the doorway to the living room, looking at the framed photographs on the wall. Evelyn smiled out from 3 of them, the picnic by the river, the day we put the swing up in the maple tree out back, our last trip to the coast where she combed shells with Claire while the gulls heckled them from the pier. She's been gone 8 years, and I still talk to her when the house is quiet. I've never minded being alone. But alone isn't the same as lonely when the rooms have a memory. I climbed the stairs. It took only 1 step into my bedroom to confirm what I'd suspected at the table. The closet door, open by exactly 4 inches. The bed covers, not folded the way I folded them, not tucked with the neat triangle at the corner, but loosened and pulled back. The second dresser drawer, flush from a distance, but with a paper corner protruding a hair's width from the left side. On the floor by the dresser, a faint crescent of glitter from the last card Claire made me for Father's Day, which had been taped to the inside of that drawer since June. If I hadn't been the one to tape it, I might not have noticed glitter that fine. I pulled the drawer all the way out. Papers had been shuffled, restacked, placed almost back where they belonged by someone who understood that almost feels like exactly in a life without witnesses. I ran my fingers along the underside of the drawer, where the tape had sat for years like an insurance policy. I felt bare wood. The key was gone. I stood with my palms flat on the dresser and took 3 slow breaths the way my physical therapist taught me after my surgery. It's a useful habit. Breath feeds the part of the mind that does math. Panic feeds the part that wants to throw drawers across a room. There is a kind of person who thinks older men are not dangerous because our knees pop when we stand. There is another kind of person, rarer, who knows better. I've never been dangerous in the sense of fists or knives. But 30 years in insurance gave me a different set of tools: patience, pattern recognition, a memory for the way guilt arranges itself behind the eyes. People trying to defraud a company tell stories in a particular key. People who are about to steal from family hum the same note without knowing they're singing. I put the drawer back, turned off the light, and lay down fully dressed on the bed. I left the door open 2 inches. I left the fan on the dresser humming. The house did its settling. The clock chimed 10, then 11. At 11:47, I heard the floorboard by the living room window complain softly. Then the hush of a door opening. Then Ethan's voice, low and urgent, riding the old ductwork up through the vent beside my bed. "Yeah, it's me. Everyone's out. No, she's asleep. Look, he's not a problem." Silence while someone on the other end spoke. "I told you, I've seen the paperwork. Bank statements. He's got enough to wipe it. I found the key. I'm not an idiot. Tomorrow's perfect, Tuesday. Claire's at book club 7 to 9. I go up at 8. We're done by 8:05. Another pause. It's not like that. He's a nice guy, but he keeps everything like it's a museum piece. Old men set a routine and never move. He leaves the bedroom door open when he sleeps. He doesn't hear the stairs when you skip the 3rd and the 6th. Trust me, it's fine. By Thursday, we're gone. I'll tell Claire I got an offer in Portland. No, she won't ask questions. She doesn't ask the right ones. I tapped the record button on my phone. The little red circle glowed. It picked up 80% of the words and 100% of the contempt. I told you, I owe 47. They're not patient guys. I'm not planning a museum heist. It's a safe in a closet. Spare me the lecture. I've got this. He kept talking. He said the word fool twice, once as old fool, once as lonely fool. He chuckled near the end, the way men chuckle when they're measuring a mark. Then the line went dead. His footsteps crossed the living room again, quiet on the edges of the rug and louder on the 12 longboards that run east-west under the bay window. He waited on the 3rd stair. He waited again on the 6th. He opened the guest room door and closed it with a click. I stared through the dark at the crack in my door and felt less like a victim and more like a chessboard he'd assumed was empty. I did not sleep. I watched the ceiling turn from black to slate to pale gray. When the robins started their foolish pre-dawn warbling in the maple, I got up, showered, and made coffee. At breakfast I mentioned, casually, that I hadn't slept well. Tossed and turned, I said, "Think I'll take one of those prescription sleep pills tonight. Knock me out. I hate feeling foggy in the morning, but I hate staring at the ceiling more." Ethan brightened like someone had handed him an umbrella in a rainstorm. "You should rest," he said. "Claire and I can watch TV downstairs. You won't hear a thing." "No, he won't," Claire said. "Those pills, Dad, you really do sleep like a rock when you take one." Ethan's smile tightened a fraction. He didn't like that she'd volunteered the fact, but the fact was convenient for him. "There," he said, bumping my shoulder with the back of his hand like we were friends, "we have a plan." We did. After eggs and toast, Claire took a shower and left for errands. Ethan said he needed to make calls about job leads. I told him I wanted to check the gutters before it rained. He nodded, but he watched me from the front window as I backed the truck out. He likes to know where every piece is on the board. The hardware store is 3 miles down River Road. It has a little of everything and a staff that trusts you to know what you need. I bought a spring-loaded confetti cannon meant for small children's birthdays. I bought 2 bags of ultra-fine glitter and a pack of nitrile gloves. On the way out, I picked up a bottle of UV dye used for leak detection and 4 packets of UV-sensitive laundry brightener. At the electronics shop next door, I paid cash for a thumb-sized night vision camera and a charge pack. Back home, I found a note on the counter in Claire's hand, grocery run. Back at 2. Love you, and a line of 4 apples on the cutting board, arranged like a semaphore. Evelyn used to do that, leave a note, and a little thing arranged just so. I put the apples in a bowl, washed my hands, and went downstairs to the workbench. The confetti cannon was easy to modify. I disassembled the shell, removed the paper streamers, and loaded the body with a measured blend of silver and gold glitter cut with a pinch of the dye powder so fine you couldn't see it with the naked eye. When the spring fired, it would coat anything in its cone with sparkle, and anything the sparkle touched with a faint residue that would fluoresce blue-white under a cheap UV flashlight. I reassembled the cannon, tested the trigger pressure on a spare drawer assembled from scrap, and adjusted the angle so the glitter would erupt at face height from the back half of the second drawer when a hand reached for the lip where the key once lived. I took the brass dummy key from the coffee tin labeled ODD keys on the workbench, an old Samsonite key from 1989, roughed it with sandpaper so it would look used, and placed it where a frantic searcher would see it the second he yanked the drawer. Back upstairs, I installed the cannon on the underside of the dresser crossbar, the barrel pointed at a line my thumb measured from 4 trials. The drawer slid smoothly, the mechanism sat invisible behind the shirts and a stack of old birthday cards, and the dummy key gleamed bravely as bait. I washed my hands 3 times with dish soap and vinegar to be safe, then set the camera on the nightstand between books so its lens faced the dresser. The app showed me what it saw, an ordinary room with a bed slightly rumpled and a dresser with a drawer that looked no different from any other drawer. I set the motion trigger to record to the phone in my pocket. I set a second camera, one I'd had for years in the garage, on the transom above the bedroom door pointing at the hallway because I believe in redundancy. I unscrewed the closet light bulbs a half turn so they wouldn't flash on when the door opened and risk announcing the safe. I moved the real key, Ethan's prize, downstairs to the junk drawer, under a nest of rubber bands in a box marked twist ties, because obvious places sometimes resist the obvious thief. Claire and Ethan returned at 2:13. I heard Claire humming from the driveway. I closed the drawer, turned off the app, and stood at the window pretending to decide whether the back hedge needed trimming. Want me to run to the pharmacy for you? Ethan called from the kitchen. If you're taking a sleeping pill tonight, we might as well get a fresh bottle. I've got enough, I said. But thank you. He came into the living room wiping his hands on a paper towel, his face open and friendly. He looks like a man built to be trusted. It's one of his great advantages. I'm thinking I'll watch the ball game after dinner, he said. Claire can read. You should turn in whenever you want. You deserve rest. Sounds perfect, I said. It did. We ate meatloaf at 6. We watched the first inning at 7. Claire put her book down at 7:12 and said she was going to paint her nails. Ethan said he would fix us both a little something, not alcohol, David, just a splash of ginger ale with bitters. My dad used to swear by it for sleep. I said no thank you. He pressed. I said my cardiologist told me not to mix anything with the pill. He swallowed whatever plan that sentence disrupted and said that was wise. At 8, I stood up, made a show of rubbing the small of my back, and told them I was calling it a night. Claire kissed my cheek. Take the good one, she said, meaning the stronger pill. You looked beat today. Don't worry, Ethan said, smiling past her. We'll be church mice. I went upstairs. I did not take a pill. I did not even get under the covers. I lay on top of the bed fully dressed, phone in my palm, eyes on a thin sliver of hallway framed by the door left open my customary 2 inches. At 2:41, the motion alert buzzed against my palm. The hallway camera showed darkness, then a shadow. The silhouette paused by the guest room. The guest room door opened a whisper and closed a whisper. The shadow crossed to my room and stilled. My door slid wider by an inch, then two. He waited. It is good practice to listen for a snore. I gave him one. Not exaggerated. Just enough. He stepped inside. Ethan is careful when he thinks carefulness matters. He took 3 steps across the rug on the diagonal that avoids the faint squeak near the foot of the bed. My phone showed his heat signature move toward the dresser. My eyes watched his hands. He pulled the second drawer. He saw the key. His face warmed with satisfaction. He reached. The glitter erupted like 1,000 tiny suns. He jerked backward, swearing, blinking. The room, my quiet, old, orderly room, became a snow globe of gold and silver. He flailed, tried to brush his face, smeared the dye invisible as he ground glitter into his eyebrows and collar. A man glittering is a ridiculous man. It is one of the universe's small mercies. I sat up slowly, making my voice the voice of a man dragged from deep sleep. What on earth? He froze like a deer in headlights, eyes wide and reflective and foolish under the sparkle. He opened his mouth and made a sound like a door hinge. He lifted the dummy key as if to show me he had only come to return something I had accidentally left out. "David," he said, "I heard a noise." I thought someone might be. He gestured at the drawer. "I was looking for confetti." I said. I turned on the lamp. The camera had already captured the best part, but I wanted to see him properly. He shimmered. There's no other word. He looked like a parade float on the wrong street. Claire's footsteps hit the hallway. "Dad," she called, breathless. "What was that?" "Careful," I said. "There's a mess." She appeared in the doorway, hair wild, rope half-tied, eyes squinting against the light. Then her mouth fell open as she took in the tableau, me upright in bed and her husband standing beside my dresser, glowing like a disco ball. What happened?" she asked. "Ethan, what is on you?" "Security device," he said, too fast. It went off when I opened the drawer." "You opened his drawer?" Claire turned to me, then back to him. "Why would you open my father's drawer?" "I heard a noise," he said again, reaching for consistency as if consistency were the same as truth. "I thought someone in his drawer," she said. "You thought an intruder was hiding in my father's sock drawer?" He licked his lips. Glitter stuck to his tongue. He swallowed. "I was checking where he keeps, my medicine is in the bathroom cabinet," I said. "It has been in the bathroom cabinet since your first migraine here 3 weeks ago." Claire closed her eyes for a heartbeat. When she opened them, they were sharper. "Ethan," she said, her voice lower now. "What were you looking for?" He turned to me, as if I might rescue him for Claire's sake. That made something hot move behind my ribs. "Claire," I said, "I think there's something you should hear." "David," Ethan said quickly, hands up, palms out, glitter falling like confession. "We don't have to." I tapped the play icon. The recording filled the small room with the hiss of ductwork and Ethan's voice saying, "Clear as you please, yeah. It's me. Everyone's out." "No, she's asleep." He's not a problem." Claire went very still. I let it run. "I've seen the paperwork. Bank statements. He's got enough to wipe it. I found the key." Pause. "Tomorrow's perfect, Tuesday. Claire's at book club 7 to 9. I go up at 8. We're done by 8:05. Ethan said my name like you say the name of someone you want to stop, because stopping is easier than admitting. I turned up the volume. "I told you, I owe 47. They're not patient guys. I'm not planning a museum heist. By Thursday, we're gone. I'll tell Claire I got an offer in Portland. She doesn't ask the right ones." Claire's hand came up to her mouth. Not the way people do in movies, as if the gesture will hold pain inside, but quick and small, like a reflex, a body trying to cover a wound. I stopped the recording. The only sound was the fan and glitter landing on the hardwood. "Gambling," Claire said softly. 47 what? No one answered her. She looked at Ethan. She looked at the open drawer. She looked back at me. Then she stepped into the room and put her hand on the bedpost the way she did when she was 16 and needed to study herself before saying something true. "How long?" she asked him. "How long have you been lying to me?" "Claire," he said, "I can explain." "How long?" He deflated by degrees. A year, he said finally. Maybe a little more. I had a run at the casino, then the card games. I was going to fix it. You were going to fix it by robbing my father. I wasn't. It's not like that. It is exactly like that. He looked at me again, and this time the look was not a request, but an accusation, as if I had engineered his disgrace out of malice rather than simple self-defense. Ethan, I said, you need to pack your things. David, he said, this is a family matter. It is, I said, which is why you need to leave. For a second, he was a man deciding if he wanted to try anger. Then he looked down at himself, at the proof plastered to his shirt and eyelashes, and decided against it. I'm not going anywhere, he said anyway, and heard what it sounded like, and added tonight. We can talk in the morning. You can talk in the driveway, Claire said. Leave your house key on the counter. He stared at her. I watched him waiting for her to soften, because she is kind and has always wanted to believe the best in people she loves. It did not come. If I were a different kind of man, I would have felt triumphant. What I felt mostly was old. Ethan went down the hall speckling glitter as he went. The guest room door opened, then closed. Drawers banged. Zippers rasped. The house held its breath. He came back with 2 bags and a face colder than he knew how to maintain. He set the key on the kitchen counter without ceremony, stepped into shoes, and walked out into the wet night with his future in a duffel and the past stuck to his skin. Claire stood in the doorway and watched the taillights go. When she closed the door, she turned and leaned her back against it. The look she gave me then contained embarrassment, grief, fury at him, and the beginning of forgiveness for herself. I'm sorry, she said. You didn't do this, I said. I brought him here. You brought him where he couldn't hurt you without witnesses. She cried then. Not the way people cry in the movies, with a face turned artfully away from the camera, but messily, with hiccups, folded into the side of my chest the way she had cried at 9 when her best friend moved away and at 19 when the college boy broke her heart. We sat like that for a long time. The mantel clock chimed 3. The house, glittering in places it had never glittered, went on being itself. In the morning, I called an attorney. Her name was Regina Park. She had a voice like a piano note struck cleanly and a way of asking questions that made men like Ethan deeply uncomfortable. I told her everything. She listened. When I finished, she said, we will do 3 things, Mr. Hale. First, we will secure what is yours with documents that cannot be gamed by charm. Second, we will create a trust for your grandchildren that cannot be touched by their parents. Third, we will install a boundary between you and your son-in-law backed by law rather than hope. Does that work for you? It does, I said. By lunch, Claire had moved her clothes into the room at the end of the hall. By dinner, Ethan's cousin had called twice and hung up without leaving a message. By 9, 2 texts had arrived from an unknown number telling me that old men who play games get played. I sent the messages and the number to Regina. She forwarded them to a detective she knew named Avery. He called me at 10, thanked me for the screenshots, and asked me to email the audio file. I did. At 11, I slept. Ethan called at 7:12 the next morning from a different number. I let it ring twice and then answered. You humiliated me, he said. You did that yourself, I said. I'm coming over. You are not. You can't keep me, Ethan, I said. The lawyer filed a restraining order this morning. If you step onto my property, you will spend the night in jail. If you call this number again, you will make Detective Avery's job easier. Silence. 47,000, he said finally. You could wipe that with a single check. It wouldn't dent you. I know what you have. You know where papers are kept, I said. That's different. Claire will see sense. She sees clearly. He said something then that would have shocked me 5 years earlier and did not now. I told him I hoped he got help. He told me I was a hypocrite. I told him to stop calling. He hung up. I went to the garage and took apart the glitter cannon. I vacuumed. I scrubbed the floorboards on my knees with a bucket and a brush like it was 1978 and the house was new. The dye washed out of most places. But glitter is a promise you cannot keep. For weeks afterward, I found constellations in the carpet of the hallway, a stray star on the cuff of my shirt, One champagne-colored fleck on the bridge of my nose reflected back at me in the bathroom mirror. It made me smile when I didn't expect to. The days had a shape again. Claire made coffee early and sat by the window with a cardigan around her shoulders. She found a part-time job at the library the next town over. She came home with stories about a boy who loved trains and a woman who wept when they found her grandfather in a ship's manifest from 1912. She started therapy on Wednesdays. She laughed more on Fridays. On the second Thursday after Ethan glittered my bedroom, Detective Avery knocked on the door. He was an unremarkable man in the way people in his line of work training to be unremarkable, mid-40s, mild tie, shoes that had walked a lot of ugly hallways. He asked if he could see the drawer, the camera, the footage. I showed him. He watched the explosion twice, and though he kept his mouth in a straight line, his eyes did what men's eyes do when slapstick justice arrives on schedule. You could press charges, he said. Breaking and entering isn't necessary when you have the recording. Attempted theft is a charge by itself. I'd prefer not to, I said. I want him out of our lives, not more woven into them. He nodded. The restraining order will help. The debt might help more. How so? Men who owe the wrong people get very quiet when anyone with a badge asks questions, he said. They disappear from the places they shouldn't be. Besides, he tapped his phone. If he shows up glittering again, give me a call. The attorney worked faster than I expected. In a week, my will had a new spine. I did not disinherit Claire. Love does not require cruelty. But nothing flowed through her to a man who had arranged theft with a smirk. Instead, Regina drew a clean line to the future, an education trust for any grandchildren, administered by a bank I trust more than memory, with distributions made to schools, to bookshops, to dorms, not to hands that might treat tuition as an ATM. The house, when I am done with it, will be sold and the proceeds divided between a scholarship in Evelyn's name at the community college and the fund for the little ones who still draw pictures with stick families and bright suns in the corners. You're not punishing your daughter, Regina said when she slid the papers across the desk. You're protecting her from obligation she didn't incur and a man who did. Claire signed what she needed to sign with a square jaw and a steadier hand than she had the night of the explosion. If I ever doubt whether I did the right thing, she said, I'll look for glitter in my shoes. Summer arrived. The maple outside the window threw wide leaves like open hands. The library asked Claire to take on more hours. She said yes and brought home books she thought I'd like. I grilled on the back patio the way Evelyn had taught me, flipping once and only once. We ate peaches leaned over the sink. I ran the sander over the kitchen table and oiled it with a rag until it gleamed like something you could see your face in. On a hot Tuesday in July, the doorbell rang while I was shelling peas. A man in a wrinkled polo stood on my porch shifting from foot to foot. He looked like a credit card past due. You David Hale? He asked. I am. He scratched the back of his neck. Guy named Ethan owes my boss a chunk. Said he could make a dent if he came by and talked to his father-in-law. Said maybe he'd be willing to. I don't know. Help a family man out. Your boss, I said, should pick his clients with more care. The man gave me a look that would have been dangerous if it had been attached to a man with more spine. You don't want us coming around. No, I said. I don't. And you don't want the detective who lives 4 streets over to see your car in my drive. He's very bored in the summer. The man snorted. He looked past me into the quiet house. He looked down at the pea shells curled in my palm. You don't look like trouble, he said. That's worked for me, I said. Please leave. He did. When the door shut, I texted Avery the license plate and the time. He told me good work and to call if they appeared again. They did not. 3 months to the day after the glitter, the papers came through for the divorce. Claire signed her name where she needed to. Ethan did not contest. Perhaps the restraining order convinced him. Perhaps the debt did. Perhaps the glitter did, stuck in seams he could not wash away. That night, after she put the envelope in the outgoing mail, Claire and I sat on the back steps with our feet on the warm stone. I keep replaying little things, she said, twining her fingers. The first time he asked me to look up your property value because he was curious what houses here went for. The way he wanted to drive you to the bank that day. The aspirin. That's how memory works, I said. It's a net we only know is there when we drag it back and find what it caught. I hate that I didn't see it. You saw what you needed to see then. You see different now. That's not failure. It's growth. She leaned her shoulder against mine. I love you, she said. I love you, I said. In September, the library hosted a volunteer appreciation day. Claire stood on a small stage in a blue dress and thanked the retirees who taught chess in the children's room and the woman who reshelved mysteries because she liked how the titles sounded next to each other. After, Mrs. Whitmore, she of the cat in the maple, cornered me at the punch table. Word is, she said, you installed a security system that uses glitter. Word travels fast, I said. Fast and with embellishment, she said. Did it work? It did, I said. Better than I hoped. You ought to write it down, she said. People forget good ideas if you don't set them in ink. Maybe I will, I said. I thought I would never hear from Ethan again, and mostly I didn't. Twice over winter, my phone lit up with new numbers from unknown area codes. I let them go to voicemail. Each time a man who sounded tired said my name like a challenge and hung up without leaving a message. The bank sent a fraud alert in January when someone attempted to open a credit line using my address. The fraud department reversed it in 3 hours and thanked me for keeping impeccable records. I laughed when the manager said impeccable because the word comes from the Latin for without sin, and nothing about this story felt sinless. But I accepted the compliment. On the first warm day of April, I found, in the back of the junk drawer under a nest of rubber bands in the box labeled twist ties, a gleam of brass I had moved there 10 months earlier. I held the safe key in my palm, then walked it to the garage, wrapped it in masking tape, wrote not a key on the outside in block letters, and tucked it into a mason jar full of old screws. Sometimes humor feels like armor. Sometimes it feels like a prayer. People ask me, when they hear a version of this story, if I'm proud of what I did. Proud isn't exactly the word. I am relieved I trusted my instincts when courtesy suggested I should not. I am grateful for the mix of restraint and mischief that kept my hands busy the morning after I recorded a thief. I am glad, truly glad, that when justice came it wore sequins. The world is violent enough. If cosmic balance wants a laugh once in a while, who am I to argue? In May, the library hosted a craft fair. Children walked between tables with glitter on their cheeks from the face painting booth. One boy came up to me and showed me a paper crown. It sparkles, he said, turning his head so the sun caught the glue lines. See, I said. Looks like it could catch a thief. What? He asked. Never mind, I said, and bought a maple cookie and ate it standing in the parking lot so the crumbs could feed a dozen small birds who did not have to know anything about men who think old houses are easy targets. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and one of Evelyn's blank recipe cards. On the first line, I wrote glitter, DYE, camera, and underlined each word. On the second, I wrote record. On the third, I wrote trust yourself. I taped the card inside the door of the cupboard with the mugs. Not because I need the reminder now, but because houses remember for you when you forget. We keep our homes not just for shelter, but for instructions. Close the door all the way. Oil the third hinge in spring. Never buy peaches that do not smell like peaches. If a man asks about your safe and calls you a man your age, breathe, count, and set a trap that will show him who you are. Sometimes justice roars. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it pops like a party favor at 2:43 in the morning and drifts down like stars. Sometimes justice sparkles. Claire asked me to tell this story once, out loud, to a circle of women at the library who meet on Thursdays to drink tea and read essays to one another. I said yes and stood where the teen poetry slam had taken place the week before. I thought I would keep it brisk. It took an hour because every time I tried to hurry past something, a hand went up and someone asked a question that required me to step back and show the shape of a room, the curve of a drawer, the speed a man moves when a plan feels almost too easy. When I finished, Mrs. Castillo, tiny, 82, eyes like needles, said, "My husband would have loved this." He was a detective. He always said men's mouths tell on them, but nothing tells faster than a foolish plan meeting a clever house. The room laughed. Then it went quiet the way rooms go quiet when love walks through them. After everyone left, Claire and I stacked chairs and folded table legs and carried them into the supply closet. She tucked her head against my shoulder and said, "I'm not sorry anymore." For what? For the time we lost to a man with a smile and a hole. We didn't lose it, I said. We learned from it. I learned where to aim a glitter cannon. You learned where to place your trust next time. She laughed. Do you think there will be a next time? With glitter? Almost certainly. With trust? I hope so. It's the only way the world works. On the drive home, a pale spring moon hung over the river. The maple out front stretched its limbs like a man waking from a long nap. I checked the mailbox and found a postcard from a city 2 states away. No return address. On the back, for words, "You can't stop me." I showed it to Detective Avery the next morning. He shrugged. "You already did," he said. Perhaps we did. Perhaps men like Ethan stop themselves eventually, which is only a poetic way of saying that gravity always wins. I still keep the safe in the closet. I still tape keys under drawers sometimes, but less often. Mostly I keep the drawer empty to remind myself that what we think we need to protect is sometimes different from what we actually need to guard. Papers can be replaced, money rebuilt, locks changed. The time you spend doubting your own eyes is harder to recover. When I go upstairs at night, I still leave the door open 2 inches. I like the way the hall light paints a narrow gold rectangle on the floor. I like the way air moves through old houses if you give it a place to go. I like knowing that if a man I don't invite steps inside again, the places he touches will light up under a cheap flashlight like constellations naming themselves. There is glitter in the cracks of the floorboards still, if the sun finds the angle. Sometimes it glows. Sometimes it doesn't. When it does, I remember that the night my son-in-law tried to steal my money, what he really tried to take was my self-respect. I remember that he failed. I remember that being an old man means you've learned which parts of yourself can't be stolen and which parts you can't give away. This is the part of the story where a narrator would tell you Ethan learned his lesson, paid his debts, and now teaches 3rd graders chess in a church basement. I don't have that ending. The last I heard, he took a job 3 states away selling things that make people feel like they've bought safety. Maybe he can sell it convincingly. He sold it to himself once. The ending I do have is quieter. Claire planted tomatoes in 3 terracotta pots on the back step. The library gave her a little lapel pin that says "Ask me about interlibrary loan." The maple drops yellow leaves in October like invitations to a party the birds throw every year. When I cook roast chicken now, sometimes I set an extra plate at the table, not for Ethan, of course, but for the part of myself that doubted. I tell that part it can eat here as long as it wants. It doesn't need to ask about the safe. It already knows. People online like stories tied with bows. Real life knots itself more messily. But if you want to bow, here it is. I bought a small glass jar at the craft store and labeled it Justice. It sits on the shelf by the door. Inside it there are exactly 9 flecks of glitter, 3 gold, 6 silver, collected from the dresser, from the hallway, from the cuff of a shirt I saved because it made my daughter laugh when she saw the sparkle still there. Sometimes I shake the jar and watch the flecks settle. If you get the light right, they fall like slow snow. If you get the light wrong, they don't look like anything at all. The trick is to stand in the right place and wait long enough. That's a good definition of justice, too. And if you're still wondering about the safe, what's in it, whether the combination is numbers anyone could guess, I'll tell you this much. The top shelf holds a photograph of Evelyn laughing, hair blown across her face, a shell in her hand as if she'd found treasure. The bottom shelf holds the deed to the house, 2 passports, and a letter I wrote the morning after Ethan called me a fool. The letter says only open if you forget what to do. I haven't had to open it yet. If you enjoyed hearing this, well, you know what the kids say at the end of their videos. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, or just tell someone you love something true before the night is over. That works too.